Hi, everybody. Welcome to Wealth Protector TV. This is Paul Hitchcock. I'm with the asset protection, estate planning, and business planning firm Barth Calderon. This is our channel to give back high value to you. Really excited to have my guest here, Bill Black, on today. Bill is one of the first certified exit planners in the country, has been practicing for over 20 years, is the host of Exit Coach Radio, a big podcast show and a show broadcast from Los Angeles on AM radio, and hosts many, many webinars for Vistage International, which is a fantastic organization. Welcome, Bill.
Hey, Paul, how are you doing today? Good to be with you.
Yeah, great. Good to see you again, Bill. And obviously, we've known each other over the years, had some really great conversations around succession to exit planning. And I want to just jump into this. This is a very hot topic, and I know you're a top speaker to Vistage, given this around the country and to other organizations. What are we going to talk about today? What are we going to focus on?
Well, Paul, I'd like to talk about some of the trends that we're seeing, just so that people can get an understanding of why it's becoming more and more important if they're planning an exit in the next several years, to really understand what's happening and why. And I'd also like to talk about just some basic documents you should have in your vault for succession planning. But, the bigger part of succession and exit planning is more, not if something bad happens, but what if something good happens? I want to be ready for a potential buyer that might come along, or a situation where I don't want to be remembered for my lack of planning in a situation where I could have either sold my business or transitioned out, or made good choices about who my successors will be.
So as we get into this, Bill, is this any particular size of business that you're focused on when you're talking to owners or giving this talk?
Good question. I talk a lot to Vistage Worldwide members, so they're usually not micro businesses, but they're usually small, and I would call small mid businesses, probably under 500 employees, somewhere probably in the revenue range of a couple million to 50 to 100 million, just really depending on their industry. And I think that the industry doesn't matter so much. This is really like one of those kind of mechanic things. It's like when we open the hood, the engines all kind of start to look the same in some way, shape, or form. So we really are working on how do we get ready for an event that's going to happen. I mean, look, the statistics are in. 100% of business owners will someday exit their business. Is it voluntary? Is it on our terms? It boils down to, is it from a position of strength and readiness, or does it just happen to us we're unprepared and things
Right.
go wrong then.
Right. Well, you just added a third leg to the old saying, the inevitable death, taxes, and now it's exiting your business.
Right. It's inevitable, right?
Yeah. All right. So where do we start, Bill? Like, let's get into the meat of this thing of the mechanics of it, or where you want to start.
Yeah, and the way I usually start my talks is, let's understand really what's happening, what the trends are, and why we're here. There are, over 75 million baby boomers in the U.S., and that's a trend not only in the U.S. but throughout the world. So there are a large number of people, and it was the first generation. This is born between 1946 and 1964. So it was the first generation of people who went to college in big numbers, and they came out and expected, the corner office job, and they just weren't finding it. So a large number of these baby boomers started their own business eventually. And so now they're at the stage where, again, born between 1946 and 64. So they're getting up in age. The median is 65, and it goes between probably, let's say 55 to 75. So right. A lot of them are starting to say, okay, I know how I got into this business. I need to start thinking about how I'm going to get out of it. And they don't realize how crowded the marketplace is. And they may not realize that there's some other trends that Vistage Worldwide members are hearing more about that will affect their timing of their exit.
Interesting. Very interesting stats. And so, so then how do you start the process with an owner, the exit process? When does it start, and what are the pieces involved?
Yeah, it's funny. It usually starts when the owner says, "I'm ready to start," because they're done putting it off, or maybe they've had a key employee threaten to leave or leave. Certainly, the Great Resignation has its toll on a lot of business owners who thought, well, maybe that key employee of mine. Well, number one, they'll either maybe be the owner down the road if I can't find a buyer, or they're certainly going to be important to me to transition the business with them intact. And so it might be an event that's happened. Maybe a friend of theirs has become ill or even passed away, and they realize, boy, looks like they're going through a mess over there. I sure don't want that to happen to me. But generally, I get calls from people when they say, I'm thinking maybe 3 to 5 years from now, I want to either start slowing down and maybe becoming very part-time, and then transition out. And it's a smart timeline because a lot of people might think that it's like buying a house. Paul, I've bought and sold 2 houses in the last month out here in Colorado in the span of 1 week.
Yep.
The span of 1 week. But it's not like that for a business owner. First of all, they may not be able to sell in a crowded marketplace. Most of the M&A advisors and business brokers that I've interviewed on Exit Coach Radio, and I've interviewed over 1,500 advisors, so I've interviewed quite a few in that category.
Yeah.
And they all say the same thing. They say, look, we turn down about 9 for every 1 we take on.
Oh, okay.
And the
Okay.
reason is because a business broker or a M&A person puts a lot of time and effort, oftentimes about the average of 9 months to a year of a business that they take on. And so they have to vet very carefully, and they don't get paid until the end of all that usually.
Right.
So they're not willing to take everybody that comes their way. And so it's really important for listeners to understand why so many business owners get turned down and what they can do to be in the class that gets accepted if that's the path they want to go down.
Yeah. Why do businesses get turned down? Because I think this gets into the preparing your business for an exit. So
Exactly.
why do they stay in there? Why do they get turned down? Like what goes into the business, and what would you counsel owners on at this stage?
It's pretty simple. It really boils down to a few key things. Number one is just untrustworthy or sloppy financials. And
Okay.
it's all about trust. A buyer is buying a business because they want to pay back, they want to get paid back for the money they put into it, and they want it to grow and prosper. And so if the financials are sloppy, then they start wondering, well, what else do I not trust? If I can't trust the numbers, or if the seller says, well, we're going to recast all that, it's just, you know what? Pass, hard pass. Second reason is lack of a growth plan. In other words, maybe you've taken the business as far as you can, but I've heard it over and over again, and especially in Vistage Worldwide, buyers aren't buying the business for what you've done with it. They're buying it for what they think they can do with it. And so if you can help them, if you have a business that can grow, maybe you couldn't grow it to the extent you could, lack of capital or manpower, but another company can, or another owner can. That's important. Third is basically they've got too few clients. They're not diversified in their client base. And so losing a big client is going to be a big problem, because buyers are really nervous that they're going to lose some clients along the way, and they probably will. And so they're worried about, wow, if I lose a client that represents 25% of revenues, I'm not going to have a good outcome here. And another reason that they get turned down is they don't have a well-trained and retained management team.
Oh, okay.
Because remember, the owner is not the seller is generally going to stick around for as little time as possible and then be on their way with the money.
Right.
But if the key employees don't stick around, then the buyer could be very problematic. So with the key employees comes processes and systems. I mean, what do the key employees, what's their framework? Where do they run? Do they have good CRM and systems? Do they have a good operating plan? All those types of things. So it's just the kind of common sense things you'd expect. It's like, well, first of all, is the business profitable? Is it doing well? Are there too many people with the same last name in the business? Or are these key employees going to stick around past the point of a sale or transition? Can we grow the business or scale the business? Those types of things are really factor in. And those are filters that those M&A people and business brokers will use very quickly to dismiss a non-contender. And that's how they get down to their 1 out of 10.
Okay. So Bill, when you're sitting down and going through this with an owner, I know that there are things that you talk about that owners can do to make sure, for example, that key employees do stick around, that you tie them into the business, which isn't that why you start early on the exit planning? Because there are pieces you need to put in place that take amount of time to come to fruition. Is that
Exactly right? Well put. Well put. It's kind of like a slow drying glue. You know, in some cases, if you say, look, and we find a lot of people, and we're doing a lot of work on a couple different retention programs that are very popular right now. One's a form of phantom stock, or some people call it shadow stock. The bottom line is it's not really stock at all. It's something that mimics stock ownership by the employee, and it's all on a contract.
Okay, so it gives the employee the feeling that they're tied into the business, the growth of the business, they're invested in the business, but you don't have to give them ownership.
Yeah, you're giving them basically what they want is a stake in the outcome. Right. You know, if the business is sold, you know, I'd like to have a small piece of that. You know, yeah. I realize I get paid a good salary, but remember when an owner starts to do succession and exit planning, they're trying to reduce the amount of work they do in the business and increase the amount of work they do on the business.
Right, right.
So they need to hand off that work to some people, and those are the key people usually that they're going to hand that work off to. And with that, you can say, but we're not going to pay you any more on a cash or bonus right now, but we're going to give you a piece of whatever happens in the future. If we grow the company and sell it, you'll get a piece of that. As long as you're with us, you know, if you leave us, sorry, you know, game's over. But if we grow it and sell it, you'll get a piece of that. If we grow it and we don't sell it before you reach retirement age, you'll get an increased payout in the form of a share of the growth down the road.
Okay.
So it's become very vogue for things called stock appreciation rights, which again, there's that word stock again. It's based on the increasing value of the company.
Right.
So that's where the appreciation comes in. The rights is kind of a misnomer too. They don't have shareholder rights. They basically have a contract that says if they stay and they work hard and they grow the value of the company along with you, that they'll be a growth partner. They'll get something down the road at the end of the game.
Okay. So what do you do when you're sitting down and going through your exercise and you're, you know, opening the hood up? What are you taking the owner through? I mean, you know, what are you focused on with the owner?
Good question. So Paul, the whole process starts with a little goal setting. Okay, and for the owners, I've made it really simple for owners of businesses to say, look, there's 3 T's you have to worry about, and we need to know about, you know, not just me, all of your advisors. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to create a coordinated workbook, working outline that all of your advisors are going to work from. Paul, one CPA said, Bill, what you guys put together is a hymnal that all of us advisors can sing from. I thought that's really good. So
that's a great analogy.
We want to know about the 3 T's. Timing. What's your timing? What's your timeline? If it's next year, you know, there might not be a lot we can do. If the business is ready for sale and you want to sell it next year, great. Let's get it right to a business broker, somebody that will give you a warm introduction to someone.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of like finding a new banker. It's better if you go in warm than if you go in cold.
Right.
If it's 3 years to 5 years, let's start thinking about whether or not the second goal comes into play, and that is your target buyer or target owner down the road. And a lot of times people say, well, I'd like my son or daughter to own the business or a key employee, but they don't have any money. How do we do that? And there are a lot of strategies. We've done a lot of good strategies where we can transfer the business over time to a son or daughter or key employee or key employees who don't have any money of their own. We use the business profits to buy out the owner. But we need to know who that target is. So we've got timing, target. The third one is treasure. And treasure is, what do you need financially after taxes out of this transaction?
Okay.
So that you're not going to be regretting selling your business for too little or too early in your life.
Got it. Okay. And very interesting exercise to go through. So you're goal setting, and then you're executing on a strategy for what they need to get done in order to package that business or get it going. So now there's the execution phase, whether it's retaining key employees or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then I know, this is a rhetorical question. I know the answer because you and I have had some great discussions about this, but there's the after the sale of the business too, right? Is that now you've sold it, now what? And I know you get into some of those issues too.
Yeah, and again, hopefully we're talking about that early on. I mean, the fact finding and discussion, goal setting area includes a lot of that. Like what are you going to do after that? Because a lot of people get hung up and stay in their business too long because they can't imagine life afterwards.
Right.
And that includes talking to your spouse if you're married. What are the two of your goals? Is your spouse continuing to work after you exit your business, or are you guys ready to? Have you always wanted to travel? Do you have kids or grandkids, or what? What do you want to do? So it's really important. So our bottom line is, in our workbook that we create, it starts with facts about the business. So that let's say, Paul, that we want to come to Barth Calderon and work with them, and they don't know this client before. Right. Well, we don't want Barth Calderon, the law firm, or any attorney or law firm or any other professional advisor to spend a lot of time on their fact-finding process.
Right.
We want it to all be there in about 3 or 4 pages so they can skim it and say, okay, we see the size of the business, the value of the business, all this kind of stuff. Now we also see on the next page or chapter the goals that the owner wants to accomplish. It's very important that your advisor is clear on your goals as well.
Yep.
And then the third section is a chapter of potential strategies to put in place. Like you said, retaining key employees. Are you the right tax structure? Is your business running properly as a tax structure? Should we be talking to your CPA about that? Do you have a emergency succession plan if things should go awry? What if you have a heart attack next week and pass away, and we're just planning to sell the business, but we have that in 2 years, but we don't have a backup plan right now. So a lot of these things are, things people don't really want to talk about a lot, right. But it's really important that we get to the point on all this stuff so we can say, look, we're ready, whether something good or something bad happens, we're ready, we're getting ready for it.
Right.
And some of those things take some soul searching, like what will I do after my business is sold and I have all this time on my hands?
Right. Yeah. And but what about the importance of the integration of the legal aspects of the sale of business? I know you're integrated in a very efficient way with our firm at Barth Calderon, but I think that is a big bonus too, right? Because there's our legal ramifications and making sure you're buttoned up and all those things when it comes to selling the business. Certainly estate planning, asset protection. You get into those discussions too?
Yeah, we do, because we cross a lot of advisor lines. I mean, we go through on the strategy, on the way from I'm not sure what I want to do to implementing a confident exit strategy. We're going to use at least one attorney. We'd use certainly estate and asset protection, certainly, because right. It doesn't do any good to get completely liquid if it can just be taken back away, or right. If it's not planned out at the end. So we also use business attorneys, and Barth Calderon has those for things like buy-sell agreements or retention planning types of agreements. We might get involved even looking at other types of attorneys like ERISA attorneys for certain structures. Accountants get involved. Certainly accountants will get involved, and sometimes we have to explain strategies to them because they might be really good at doing the tax return, but they haven't really thought about some of the strategies we might come up with. So we'll get them in touch with experts that can explain that. We would probably talk to insurance folks, benefits folks, maybe even I've brought in counselors and psychologists on more than one occasion to say, look, we've got relationships that aren't healthy at the workplace.
Right.
And we need to either get those healthy or figure out what else to do, because if a lot of times, especially a lot of family businesses out there, they're just not used to, they haven't been having a healthy business relationship. And so sometimes there's some painful discussions.
Yeah.
When I want my kids to take over and we go, look, we've talked to all your managers, and if you just leave and you leave your kids in charge, you're not going to have much of a business in a few days. So either we need to work on that relationship between the kids and them and start over with that, because a lot of times we find the kids took the elevator instead of the stairs to the top office.
Right.
So we really, there's a lot to think about. There's a lot to deal with. Then what we need is a comprehensive plan right in the middle of all of these different advisors, so that you don't get pulled every which way every time a new advisor says, well, let's work on tax strategies. And we can say, well, look, here's what we do. We have the facts, the goals, and all the strategies. Now we have all the advisors looking at all the strategies and blessing them or amending them usually, but not throwing them out. And then we have all the advisors that are there say, look, we're all together. Let's help this client. Let's put together a prioritized running order. What's really most important that this client work on first? We'll get to legal, we'll get to financial, we'll get to tax, we'll get to business strategies. Well, what's the best running order for all of these? So there's a lot of communication and collaboration.
It's a great way to describe it, because as you and I both know, we talk to owners across the country, and a common thread that is woven throughout their businesses and them is that they typically have multiple advisors, but nobody's talking to each other. Right. And so, opportunities are missed, or there's holes in the planning. So if you come in there as a quarterback that can truly integrate everybody, get them on the same page, working towards a common objective, very powerful, very powerful.
Right. And the process that I use was invented, in fact, by an attorney who had worked for many, many years in this field and realized that advisors weren't talking to each other, that clients were getting pulled every which way from everybody. And then he started off to develop this process and then had it vetted by all of the different disciplines in the advisor land that basically have improved it over the years. So that was a lucky day for me, because otherwise we find that a lot of advisors put succession planning on their website, or they say they do it, but when you ask, can you show me what your process, what does your deliverable look like? They just say, well, it's different every time. And it doesn't have to be different every time. It should be a process just like everything else.
Yep. Love it, Bill. Great information. We could talk forever on this topic, and I know we're going to have you back to continue this discussion, maybe get into some granular stuff, but excellent. And for those of you watching, thank you for being here. And we always want to say that if anybody has questions on any of our shows, especially this one with Bill, you want to get some one-on-one input directly with Bill, you're going to be able to reach Bill. This is streaming everywhere: YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, I think on Twitter. So around this video, either up here or down there, you'll see the way to get a hold of us, to get one-on-one with Bill. Really glad you came. Bill, thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure, Paul. Thanks. Keep up the good work.
Yeah, thank you.